Well, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast, this new series of conversations with some of the key leaders and influencers from across the vast UK infrastructure sector. My name is Anthony Oliver, and I'm going to lead today's discussion. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about transforming infrastructure performance, moving beyond productivity. For decades, infrastructure sector clients have waged a battle to improve the supply chain's woeful design and construction productivity, driving down costs and accelerating delivery times. But in reality, should more effort be focused instead on driving towards better overall asset performance and achieving better overall economic and social outcomes? To discuss this issue, my guest today is Andy Mitchell, Chief Executive of Thames Tideway Tunnel, who right now is building the £4.3 billion 25-kilometre super SURB beneath London. Andy was also until recently co-chair of the Construction Leadership Council, playing a key role in helping the sector to work with government to improve outcomes. Andy, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. Very pleased to be here.
Well, let's start with some definitions. I just made the distinction between infrastructure performance and industry productivity. Am I right? Is the focus still on driving down costs and accelerating programme? What does transformation of infrastructure performance look like to you, Andy?
Well, I think you are right. There's no doubt both of these issues need dealing with. I think the first point of productivity is arguably more familiar to people because we've talked about it for years. How many industry reports have we had that have said the same thing over my career, 30, 40 years or whatever? And there's no doubt we've really got to start moving the dial here. We've said it for long enough, but I think the imperatives that we're now facing are making that even more clear. So I don't think it's an either or. I think we need both, but they are quite different things. And of course, when we talk about delivery productivity, we tend to think of cost and time, but there's a third currency called carbon. And there's many other ways of measuring the effectiveness of delivery. So I think we ought to recognise that we're talking about how we build things more sustainably. But then the second part of, how do we build better things that are more appropriate? And
that's the why we're doing it.
Yeah. And there it's absolutely right. We need to be looking at that in a way broader sense. The economic and social outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and that then takes you to trying to put some shape and definition to value in the broadest sense. But that's got to mean social value in that way. So I think it's both. I think the second one is perhaps a newer challenge and something that people have got to get their heads around. But without both, we're going nowhere.
Okay. Well, a year ago, the government's Infrastructure and Projects Authority produced its Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap to 2030, and that highlighted a way that the sector can move towards creating these better outcomes. How will this document help?
Well, I think it's a very useful document. I think it's interesting that it was first produced in, 2017, and already we're on the 2030 version, and you can see that that's evolved quite quickly. But I think it's a good framework. The five focus areas, I think, speak much more to what we've just been talking about of improved outcomes for people and nature. The third focus, the platform approach, I think is vital. We all talk about MMC and offsite and that kind of stuff, but really getting that embedded as a way of thinking and geographically as well, I think is another emphasis that we see larger now than before. So I think the five key areas make total sense. Arguably not rocket science in any of them, but I don't think there's rocket science in much of what's being said. This is about getting real.
Yeah, but it's about getting clients to think, I suppose, a bit more about what they're trying to achieve right at the start. Yeah, and it dovetails with the work you did when you were at Construction Leadership Council. With the publication of the Construction Playbook, which is about creating this best practice framework to improve project outcomes. There's a lot in that. Give us the elevator pitch for the playbook. Why is that so important?
So I think the significant thing about the playbook, as I say, there have been many other reports about how things could be done or need to be done differently. But a really significant point for me is that this is a product from the Cabinet Office. It's unashamedly, in their view, it's a direction, it's a blueprint for all government departments, and I don't think we've seen that before. It's a real sign that government are taking this very seriously. And a huge amount of effort. I can't think of the number of sessions I sat in on all the way through the sort of lockdown period, people working very hard. But it wasn't just the government departments. It was private sector development or developers as well. It was the big supply chain players and some of the SMEs as well. So I think it's a very encouraging piece. All the discussions I've had with players in the industry and the supply chain see this as a big step forward.
Right, yeah.
But the supply chain has a massive role to play and respond. And as the Cabinet Office have said to industry, if you see government clients that aren't following the principles, you need to call it out.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think I've heard a government say that quite so clearly and brutally before. There is a comply or explain principle within this document. And so I think this is a really encouraging sign of government recognising the role they have to play, and we've got to support it.
But and I get that, and I think the work you did there is recognised as really taking the industry and the government forward on that. I have to mention, I suppose, that we've gone through yet another change of government departments and another reorganisation. That's hard, isn't it? When you're constantly trying to work out who you're dealing with as a minister, and now which department you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean. It's not ideal, I think you'd have to say, but I think when you look at big long-term endeavours, and whether that's projects or whether that's a minerals operation or whatever, a subject that comes up time and time again is that the constant here is the business or the project, because the sponsoring bodies, the governments, will change. And therefore, it's not sufficient to say, well, the client is constantly changing. Well, that's how life is. That's how politics works. And we've just got to understand that and recognise that, therefore, a big part of the consistency has to come from the industry.
Okay. I'd say I'd describe that as a diplomatic response. But no, yeah, I mean, you're currently running the Thames Tideway tunnel project, which it's privately funded. And I believe you're approaching the end of the tunnelling phase. I mean, give us an update. How are you getting on? Are you going to finish on time and to budget? And I suppose, does that matter?
So, well, yes, it does matter. Let's deal with that one first. Look, whenever you're building a project, you're spending somebody's money. And in this case, it's a combination of bill payers' money and the shareholders have a stake in that. And so it's important to both our owners, our shareholders, but also important to every bill payer that contributes. So that's got to be important. And right back at the beginning of this, when we started, we talked about a bill range of £20 to £25, having previously talked about £70 to £80 per year. Here we are in probably our peak year at £24 something or other. I think we've stuck to what we said and what people could expect, and I think that's a big. I'm very pleased with that. Time, of course, that matters because we came here to clean up a river, and every day that it's not being cleaned is not a good day. So, and we understand that. We're in good shape. We finished the tunnelling last year. We've got our last year of meaningful sort of big civil engineering, big construction to go. In a year's time, we'll be weeks away from going live. And whilst there's all sorts of stuff to do during the commissioning to prove that it all works in all sorts of conditions, bottom line is the river will be being cleaned, and that's what we came here to do. And so it's getting quite exciting. I think we're in good shape. An awful lot of things to bring together. It's really not much more about the civils and how fast is that going or how whatever. It's more about all of the detail. The systems aren't complex, but there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of proof that and certification that needs doing. So it's a very different year for us. But yeah, we're on the home straight. We can, if I'm allowed to say, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
But of course you can. I mean, would you say though that you have been transforming performance in your project? I mean, achieving better social and economic outcomes.
So I think the way we've looked at that, if you accept the fact, and I think it's another debate. It was clear what we had to build, and that's as I say, you could challenge that in terms of outcomes and values and things. But if the principle is we needed a big pipe to collect the sewage that's going into a river, that was all fairly uncontroversial and arguably unchangeable. I think what we've done is focused on the how bit, and what can we do while we're at it to achieve the best possible outcome. So we've always talked about, if our challenge is to build a tunnel and do the engineering and clean the river, our vision was something much bigger, and it was about changing the relationship that people in London have with their river, which is a way bigger subject. And we've tried to understand, well, what does that mean, and what can we do to improve that? And that goes to how people use the river, but how people think about the river. We talk about a lost love affair. And it may sound a bit odd to talk about love affairs when you're building big infrastructure, but I think it's really important that it does speak to what social value could be.
Well, it makes it relevant to the population that's ultimately
Absolutely.
paying for this infrastructure, and ultimately won't see it because it's underground. I mean, before Tideway, of course, you were program director at Crossrail. A very challenging project, public project, and it struggled to get across the finish line. But of course, it's open now and it's looking beautiful as the Elizabeth line. Very different from the current project you're working on. But does a private sector client help change the project's approach to getting across the line, getting that outcome delivery really nailed?
So there are a lot of similarities. It's the same issue of you whatever you do, you want to do it safely, which is unquestioned in either case. I think the thing that I when I compare and contrast Crossrail with Tideway, for me, I think a really important piece was that we were privately funded. We had a clean sheet of paper. We could be any kind of company we wanted to be. We could set our own aspirations, our own vision, and I think we had more flexibility there. I think a lot of people have expected me to say, but man, the shareholders are tight with money. They wouldn't let us do this, that, and the other, and that's far from it. They actually are shareholders. A lot of whom are investing pension funds and want to be able to explain to their pensioners that their money is being deployed in a good way.
They're investing in the future. They're happy to invest in it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and investing in wholesome and positive ways of doing things. And actually, I think we've probably had more freedom to think differently, because we're not necessarily being compared with the next government project and norms and we don't do that sort of thing. We had a clean sheet. We shot for the stars in a positive way, and the shareholders supported us. So there's a lot of upside, if I can say.
Yeah. Does that make you a more intelligent client?
I think it allows us to be an imaginative client, and I think it. Yeah, when people talk about clients and what sort of client are you, the whole Project 13 thing, the intelligent client, you can get really excited or caught up in the thick client, thin client. I'm pretty clear on that you've got to be the competent client you need to be, and whether that's thick or thin or whatever is a matter of debate. But I think it's allowed us to do the very best that we could do as a client. We've been very, very clear the buck stops with us. There's only so much risk you can or should ever want to impart on the supply chain. It's allowed us to own things, react quickly and deal intelligently, thoughtfully with how things go. And of course we can to a perhaps slightly greater extent, write our own rules.
Right. Of course, it starts with you as the leader. And let's talk about that leadership role. At the recent Major Projects Association annual conference, it talked a great deal about leadership and the need to move away from the so-called superhero project leader towards creating complete teams. I mean, are you a super... I don't think you're a superhero leader. I don't know. Do you recognise this superhero leader term, and do they still exist? Do you know any?
Yeah, let's maybe clarify that for some of the listeners. I think when we talk about superhero project leaders, I think the principle was around the all-knowing, all-controlling, all-directing, arguably autocratic sort of person, which I don't think I am. Do I know people like that? Yes, we all do. But I've spent my entire career watching different styles of leadership, and I do buy the fact that sometimes it may be horses for courses, and if you're in a particular situation where there can be no ambiguity and there's a high degree of urgency, then maybe a stronger singular style might make sense. But as a leader, and certainly the way I look at it, my job here is to be the architect of the culture.
Yeah.
And if I can create a culture where everyone working in it can excel, it's recognised that the world we're in is getting more complex. You need so many different skills. It's got to be about a team performance, and I think the role of the leader has perhaps changed to be the person that can get the most out of the team, not the person that can be the biggest superhero they can possibly be, and the rest just do what they say. Yeah, the world's changing.
Okay. I mean, you've been involved in many projects over the years. Before Crossrail, you were involved in Thameslink programme for Network Rail, and then Westrail project and the airport terminal in Hong Kong. As a serial major project leader, how do you stay focused and infused during the difficult times? What do you do to take your mind off these projects, Andy?
I think it's really important to personally really believe in what you're doing. So point number one will be, don't do stuff you don't believe in. What I do when the going gets tough, if you like, I tend to decide to go and take on some kind of sporting challenge. You think, well, why would I do that? I haven't got enough time to do what I'm trying to do, and now I'm going to try and carve out more. But I think it helps me. It gives me some time, whether I'm swimming or running or cycling or whatever I'm doing. I'm sure it's good for me physically, and I'm sure that's good for me mentally. And it gives you some time out. And I imagine when I'm out there cycling on my bike or doing my swimming, and I have lots of time to think about the job. And of course you don't. You just focus on how badly you're swimming, or you're focusing on your cycling, and it just cuts you a bit of slack. So, counterintuitively, when the going gets tough, I tend to go and take something else on.
I know that when you talk about rekindling your love affair with the river, I know you did a bit of rowing at one stage as well, but you're not rowing at the moment, though.
No, I've paddle boarded the tidal Thames. I've rowed on it twice, and I've loved that, but there's a big queue of people that want to do it, and I'm quite happy to watch others do it now.
Fantastic. Back to transforming infrastructure performance and moving beyond productivity. The infrastructure world is changing rapidly. We're using a lot more data and digital tools, whether to accelerate design and construction, or preferably maybe to transform this asset operation and maintenance outcomes. How has Tideway Tunnels embraced this need to invest and perhaps save over the operational life of the asset?
Yeah, so that's a question we asked ourselves at the beginning of this, and someone asked me, we talked about smart infrastructure, what's a smart sewer? And of course, being the engineer, I started thinking, well, it would know about itself and it would tell you when it's poorly and all that. But again, that typical engineer thinking, I was thinking about the hardware rather than perhaps a broader sense of what value could we bring. And I've been fascinated recently looking at things like the epidemiology of sewage, and the fact that what we've got in our system can tell you an awful lot about the health of society. Polio outbreaks have been spotted in New York recently by sewer sampling. The COVID outbreaks have been spotted, and there's all sorts of, I think, data, nothing to do with what we built, but absolutely associated with the operation of what we've got, that I'm not sure we've even touched the surface of the value that we could bring. And I wouldn't mind betting you could say the same about damn near any other type of infrastructure. So again, it comes back to this broadest possible understanding. I think in the context of the operation, we're having a lot of discussions now with Thames Water about, okay, we've got this new pipeline in the middle of the Thames' sewer network in London. Now, how can we truly integrate that into the operations? And what would have to happen to Thames' network to, as they say now, to digitise the Bazalgette network, such that it is has an operation that's variable, and that you can now embed our new sewer into the daily operations and maintenance. And I think there's a massive opportunity there. I know Thames see that too, and it's taking up quite a lot of our time now to understand, well, what next?
Well, what's next? I suppose the government's got a 600 billion plus infrastructure pipeline. A large proportion of investment comes from the public sector as well as the private. Sum it up for me for the last minute or so. What does infrastructure, in your view, have to do to transform its performance and really deliver high-value social and economic outcome for society for that massive investment?
I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in this industry. When you look at the challenges that society is facing, and whether that's climate change, sea levels, water availability, food availability, global issues, a huge amount of what needs to be done is going to have to come from this industry, working with other industries. And the thing that's crystal clear is that the younger people coming into this industry fundamentally get this, I think, in a way that we've not seen before. And so I think there's a huge opportunity here to turn this industry into not the source of carbon, but a massive part of the solution that we're facing globally. And I think if we can get that bit right, set our ambitions properly high, then I think there's a really exciting opportunity. And whether it's government money, I think I would argue the private money, for which there is a huge need, the more we get that bit right and the more that becomes something that private investors can celebrate and persuade others whose money it actually is, the easier this becomes. So it's a virtuous circle, but it starts with high ambition.
Andy, thanks so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast. Always a great pleasure to talk to you. Some really great insights into the way we must transform the infrastructure sector. I know you're hugely busy, so thanks very much for sharing your thoughts today.
No, my pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. That's all we've got time for today, but we have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline. If you haven't done so already, do check out the new Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Andy, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.